The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the pungent scent of damp earth as I stepped out onto our quiet suburban street. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting long, golden shadows that stretched across the dew-kissed grass. It was a new day, and I could already feel its promise slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. John was sitting at the kitchen table, engrossed in a novel, his brow furrowed with concentration as he read, oblivious to the world around him. The man who had once filled our lives with laughter and warmth now seemed distant, a stranger in familiar clothing. We were two ships passing in the night, both yearning for the connection we once shared but unable to find it. I poured myself a cup of coffee, adding just enough milk and sugar to soften its bite. The kitchen was cold, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence that had settled between us like a thick fog. I took a sip, feeling the heat spread through my body, but it did little to warm the chill that had seeped into my bones. John looked up from his book, catching me staring at him. His eyes met mine for a moment before darting back to the page. The unspoken tension between us was palpable, a living entity that threatened to suffocate us both. We were two people bound by love and obligation, but drifting further apart with each passing day. The front door creaked open, bringing with it a gust of wind and the sound of scuffling feet. Our daughter burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. She launched herself at John, who caught her in a tight embrace. For a moment, the tension that had filled our home seemed to dissipate, replaced by warmth and love. But it was fleeting, like morning dew under the sun's relentless gaze. I watched as they embraced, my heart heavy with a mix of sadness and longing. I wanted nothing more than to join them, to feel that connection once again, but something had changed between us, and I didn't know if it could ever be mended. The next morning, the police arrived at our door. A chilling case had come to light. A local teacher, John Doe, was the prime suspect in a murder. As I stood on the porch, the reality of what was unfolding washed over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't believe it was happening to us, to my family. But as the days turned into weeks and the evidence against John mounted, I found myself drawn deeper and deeper into this mystery, determined to uncover the truth. The once idyllic suburban life we had built together now lay in ruins, shattered by a series of events that seemed almost too terrible to be real. But as I peeled back the layers of deceit and darkness that surrounded our once beloved town, I realized that sometimes the most chilling crimes are born from pain and desperation, from the very same places where hope and love reside. And in the midst of it all, I struggled to hold onto those fleeting moments of tenderness that had once bound us together, even as they threatened to slip through my fingers like grains of sand. The courtroom was a labyrinth of whispers and hushed voices, a testament to the gravity of the events that had transpired. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my heart pounding like a drum as I waited for the trial to begin. My eyes scanned the sea of faces, searching for any sign of John, the man who was once my partner, my confidant, and the father of my child. But all I saw were strangers, their eyes filled with suspicion and judgment. As the judge took his place on the bench, the courtroom fell silent. The prosecutor stepped forward, a steely glint in his eyes as he began to weave a tale of deceit and betrayal. He spoke of John's affair with one of his students, of late-night rendezvous and clandestine meetings that had ultimately led to the murder of another teacher. I listened as the evidence was presented, emails, texts, witness testimonies, each piece a shard in a growing mosaic of destruction. But amidst it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. A nagging doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind, like a shadow lurking in the corners of my vision. During a recess, I found myself standing outside the courthouse, the cold air biting at my skin as I tried to make sense of it all. I remembered John's smile, his laughter, the way he held me when we danced. I thought about her innocent face, her boundless energy, and the joy she brought into our lives. And for the first time since that fateful day, I allowed myself to question whether justice was truly being served. I spent every waking moment poring over the evidence, seeking out answers that would explain what had happened. I spoke with John's former students, his colleagues, even the victim's family, anyone who might hold a clue. And as the days turned into weeks, I began to uncover a story far more complex than the one being told in court. I learned of John's struggles, his financial troubles, his battles with depression, and his desperate attempts to escape the crushing weight of it all. I discovered secrets that were hidden deep within our town, dark truths that had been swept under the rug for years. And as I pieced together the puzzle, a chilling realization took hold. Sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes, even the strongest bonds can snap like a twig beneath the weight of pain and despair. As the trial neared its end, I found myself standing once more in that cold courtroom, the weight of my revelations heavy on my shoulders. I watched as John was led away, his head bowed, his eyes devoid of any trace of hope or defiance. The gavel fell and the sentence was handed down, life in prison without parole. As I walked out of that courthouse, I knew that I had to confront the truth, the bitter pill that I had been avoiding since that first day. John's actions were despicable beyond redemption, but they did not define him as a person. He was a man who struggled, who made mistakes, and who paid the ultimate price for them. And though I could never forgive him, I knew that I had to find a way to heal, for sake and for my own. In the months and years that followed, I rebuilt my life, piece by painful piece. I found solace in my work, in the simple pleasures of spending time with, and in the knowledge that I had fought to uncover the truth, that I had refused to let John's story be forgotten or swept under the rug like so many others before it. And as I watched grow into a young woman, full of hope and dreams, I realized that there was still a glimmer of the love that once bound us together. It was fragile, tenuous, but it was there. A fleeting moment of tenderness that reminded me that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light to guide us through. And with each passing day, I held onto that light, cherishing it like a precious jewel, knowing that one day it might be enough to heal the cracks that had formed within our hearts. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden rays across the dew-kissed grass as I walked along our quiet suburban street. The air was filled with the scent of blooming roses and lilacs, a reminder that life, like the flowers themselves, is resilient, capable of growing despite the darkness that surrounds it. I had spent years picking up the shattered pieces of my life, piece by painful piece, but there was one thing I had never been able to mend: my relationship with. She grew distant over the years, her once boundless energy replaced by a quiet melancholy that I could not penetrate. One day, as I sat in our living room, the scent of burnt coffee filling the air, I found myself staring at an old photo album. The pages were yellowed with age, the edges curled and frayed. But as I flipped through the images, I was transported back to a time before the trial, a time whence laughter filled our home and John's arms wrapped around me in a protective embrace. In that moment, I knew that I had to find a way to bridge the gap that had formed between us, to show that love is not always perfect, but it is worth fighting for. I approached her in the kitchen, where she stood with her back to me, stirring a pot of sauce on the stove. She didn't turn to face me, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the lines of exhaustion etched across her face. I took a deep breath and spoke the words that had been heavy on my heart for so long. I want you to know that I love you more than words can express. I'm sorry for all the pain we have caused each other, but I promise to do better, to be better. She didn't respond immediately, just continued to stir the sauce, her eyes focused on the bubbling pot before her. But then, slowly, she turned to face me. The tears that trickled down her cheeks were like a floodgate opening, and for a moment I felt the weight of all our pain come crashing down upon us. "Mom," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion, "I'm tired of pretending everything is okay, tired of feeling like I have to be strong." In that moment, I knew that I had to offer her the same grace and forgiveness I was seeking for myself. It's okay to feel the way you do. It's okay to hurt, to be angry, to be sad. But remember that we are not defined by our pain. We are defined by how we choose to rise above it. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging between us like a shroud. And then, slowly, I saw the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes, a fleeting moment of tenderness that reminded me that even the darkest nights give way to dawn. Over the following weeks and months, and I began to heal together. We spent long afternoons in the garden, tending to the flowers that had once filled our home with their sweet fragrance. We laughed together, cried together, and slowly, ever so slowly, we began to rebuild the bonds that had been broken years before. And as I stood there on that quiet suburban street, watching the sun set behind our house, I knew that I had found a measure of peace, not a perfect peace, but one that was strong enough to hold the shattered pieces of my life together. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but as I gazed out at the horizon, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light to guide us through. In the years that followed, I watched grow into a strong, compassionate woman, one who was not defined by her past but embraced it as a part of who she was. She graduated from college, found a job she loved, and even began a family of her own. And every time I saw her with her children, laughing and playing in the park, I could see the flicker of tenderness that once bound us together, a testament to the resilience of love and the power it has to heal even the deepest wounds. As for me, I continued to fight for justice, for the victims whose stories had been silenced for far too long. I spoke out against the darkness that lurked within our communities, raising my voice in protest and demanding change. And as I did so, I realized that love is not just about the connections we share with others, but also about the connection we have with ourselves, about finding the strength to rise above pain and despair and become something greater than we once were. In the end, the story of our family may not be one for the history books, but it is a story that resonates with countless others who have been touched by heartache, loss, and betrayal. It is a story of love, of forgiveness, and of the resilience of the human spirit, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. And as I gazed out at the horizon once more, I knew that our story was not over, that there were still chapters waiting to be written, lessons yet to be learned, and love stories yet to unfold. But for now, I could find solace in the knowledge that I had fought to uncover the truth, that I had refused to let darkness win. And as the sun set behind our house, casting long, golden shadows across the dew-kissed grass, I knew that I had found a measure of peace, a sense of hope and promise that would sustain me through whatever challenges lay ahead. For love is not perfect, but it is powerful, strong enough to heal even the deepest cracks, if only we have the courage to embrace it.